I want to quickly recap last week because I know some of us were not here. It is on the podcast. I highly recommend that you go listen to it because it actually is a prequel to what we're talking about today and in the future weeks. We talked about a two-body problem and a three-body problem, which is a study of celestial mechanics, which is how do things work in space, the gravitational pull of two objects. So you have the sun and the moon. How is that actually working? And then we introduced the next problem, which is called the three-body problem, which is three objects in space. And the most common one that we study, we meaning the physics and scientists study, is the Earth, the sun, and the moon. Mathematically, Sir Isaac Newton figured out how the two-body problem works, which is really pivotal because it actually affects our technology today, specifically as it relates to GPS systems, as well as we send satellites and ships out into space. And we talked about the two-body problem parallel is God and humans, and how there is this gravitational pull as humans are pulled into the gravitational orbit of God. It's beautiful. The three-body problem introduces a third entity or a third body, which last week we unpacked this. It's God and human, and the third body is culture. And this is important because we have to recognize we aren't just about God and humans and orbiting around God. We actually are in a world, in systems, in culture, in society, in our workplaces. So we have to at some point reconcile how do these three bodies function and how does the gravitational pull function and operate. And some say it can't, and some say it can, and some are indifferent, like I'm not really sure. So we talked a lot about that last week. The part that I want to remind us about this week is that we have to understand at some point you're going to have to reconcile how to be in this world following God. And I know for some, they would prefer to just have a relationship with God and disengage from the world that they live in. That is a very popular, embraced view, especially in Christian circles. Like, you know what? Forget the world. I'm just going to focus on me and my relationship with God. The challenge with that posture is you're going to have to find a way to address when Jesus actually lived in culture and when Jesus actually lived in culture, touched it, ate in it, lived in it, felt in it, and he actually tells us you need to go into all the world. So at some point, you can try to keep it a two-body dynamic, but at some point you're going to have to reconcile or confront the issues here of why you're resistant to engaging with culture, the world, and humanity, because Jesus explicitly says, go into all the world, and not only did he command it, he actually did it. So we talked a little bit about that last week. We're going to continue that conversation into today. And we also talked about engaging culture. Questions naturally emerge. Why would we create art? Why would we create music? Why would we focus on redeeming cities? Why would we focus on neighborhoods? Why would we do all this effort on this rock called Earth floating through space if God's going to destroy it in fire? What's the point? What's all the effort? Why do we do all this? So we reconciled that a little bit last week, and when you recognize your personal eschatology, now I don't want to lose you. If any of you get lost on big terms out of you, there's a really powerful tool called Google or ChatGPT. Put it in there, ask it to define it for you, and it will define it for you. Eschatology is the study of the end times. Another way you can look at it, to make it personal, is how you view how things will end in the end. How you think the story ends, that would be your personal eschatology. And the reason why this is important, because how you view the end determines how you live your life today. And you may think, I don't know what my eschatology is. The question asked, how does this end? How does the world end? What happened at the last moment, quote, moment? Whatever it is, some of you are like, I don't know. Well, guess what? That's your eschatology. I don't know what my eschatology is. Okay, there it is. That's it. And when you don't have an idea of what your eschatology is, it might explain why you're kind of wandering in life right now. So just understand that we all have an eschatology. Some of us are more concrete in it. Some of us are, I don't know. Some of us are a little more hopeful. Some of us are more a little, now it's all going to trash. All of us have a different perspective on how it ends. And so last week we talked about eschatology and why it's important because it actually determines how you live your life today. One thing I wanted us to grasp is the understanding that how you think it ends affects how you live your life today. In short, your eschatology determines your discipleship. Your eschatology, your view of how it ends in the end, informs and shapes how and why and what it looks like to follow Jesus. I want you to just sit in that for just a moment. And at the end of last week, I asked that we move away from any view that had a sacred secular perspective. That we move away from a sacred secular worldview. I ask strongly that you would at least consider, and if you want to know my personal opinion, you need to move away from a secular view, a view of the world that says there's a sacred and there's a secular. Another view of that would be there's spirit and there's matter. Things in the spirit dimension and things in the natural physical dimension, which we will call matter. This is important. I ask us all to move away from that and move towards a worldview that is this: all is sacred. That all is sacred. Everything belongs to God. Creation is good and redeemable. We would move away from escaping this world and move more towards renewal of this world. Okay. What I'm going to have you do, too, get your phones out, because I do have slides for you today. And I want you to take pictures, as it will definitely be helpful as you process this. I know there will be conversations started the moment this gathering ends. Some of you are going to go home and be lit on fire both directions, mad or happy. I don't know which one. But it will cause you to think, and that's my intent today, that I want to get you to think bigger and deeper about assumptions and beliefs that you have lived by up until this point in time. Now, when you begin to see how much the sacred secular or spirit and matter, when you begin to see how much of that theology had influenced your present and your future, you will have to go a little bit deeper and inspect and assess some held assumptions, long held or deeply entrenched assumptions and belief. There's a word in this study called dualism or duality, and what that refers to, it goes back 20 centuries literally, and it's this idea that started with Plato and it progressed over time, and the idea was this: there's spirit and there's matter. And over time, spirit was defined as good. Anything in the spiritual dimension was defined as good, and anything in the natural form of matter and physical was deemed bad. So when you hear me say the word dualism or duality, it's making reference not to just sacred and secular, it's making reference to spirit, which means good, and matter, which means bad. Are you guys still with me? So when you begin to see how much of that thinking has crept into your own ideologies, your theologies, your philosophies, you're going to have to be willing to confront some assumptions and beliefs that you've held on to. This is the tricky part. Whenever I bring up large theological frameworks and conversation, there's a couple different things that will happen. Some of you will fully resonate like, yes, finally. And some of you be like, there ain't no way that's true. Why? Because all of us have different stories of how we've come to our assumptions and beliefs today. Whenever you start looking at theology, you have to keep in mind theology is a man-made construct of their interpretation of Scripture. It is, when I read Scripture, when you read Scripture, we're actually going, okay, we're doing our best to try to understand what we're reading, what we're diving into, what we feel like God's revealing to us, what we're engaging with people, and we create what's called theology. Theology is the study of God. It is man's study of God. Theology is not something that God creates and gives it to you. Does that make sense? God gives truth, but man interprets it and creates a theology. Okay, are you guys still with me? We're in school today, if you didn't know that already. We are in school today. And so we want to bring this up because for some of us, Our entire spiritual life, our entire life is built on some very strong assumptions and beliefs. And the moment someone like myself today confronts some assumptions and beliefs, it will shake your foundation to the point that the natural human reaction is to reject it, because that means you've been believing something all this time, and it's very difficult. I understand this. It's very difficult to move from one foundation to an entirely new foundation, because lots of emotions come. It's not just a psychological thing, it's emotionally challenging to move, because you realize, you're telling me I've spent 49 years of my life believing this, and now you're here to tell me that that's actually not the complete truth? That's very difficult. I want to just say there's grace and mercy for what we're going to dive into and what we will dive into. So what I'm asked, I'm begging, not begging, pleading, exhorting, with love, if you don't, reject it and shut me out and disappear. I want to help you to think deeper about assumptions and beliefs that you've held on to, for some of you your whole life, or for some of you fairly recently. Can we do that today? Okay, 3 of you, that's all I need. I just need somebody. What I also want to recognize is Jesus wins. If I were to ask everybody in this room that is following Jesus, do you believe Jesus wins? I don't think any of you would say, no, I think he loses. So I think this is important, because all of us probably can come to the same end result. Jesus wins. The question isn't the fact that Jesus wins. The question is, how does he win? For some of us, him winning is he destroys the earth. He blows it up, it vaporizes it, and then he creates a new one and says, all right, welcome back, everyone. Some of us, that is our idea of Avengers style. Like, we just blow it all up, and we think this way. Jesus still wins. And others of us, Jesus wins is on the other end of the spectrum, and that is more renewal of what already exists. A redemption and a healing of what already exists. So I want to just put before us today that I don't think any of us would disagree if Jesus wins or not. I think we may have different opinions on perspective on how he wins and what it actually looks like. And this is important to recognize, because I believe we all want the same thing in the end. There are some issues with dualism, which is spirit and matter, sacred and secular, that I want to put before you. It shrinks the gospel to a personal, private salvation. When you view the world, the spirit is good and matter is bad, or sacred and secular, there's secular and then there's sacred, and we all have different ideas what that is. It shrinks the gospel to a personal, private salvation. Number 2, it disconnects Jesus from the real material world. It disconnects him from that. Number 3, it undermines the value of culture, work, beauty, and justice. It makes it secondary. Number 4, it promotes escapism, which means it's the goal to leave Earth rather than participate in the renewal of all things. So my title today is The End of Escapism. The End of Escapism. I have a question for you before we get into the rest of this talk. We know that Jesus died for humanity, but did he die for all of creation? Think about this. Did he die for humanity, or did he die for all of creation? Today, I want to introduce you to a major theme in Christian theology. It's wrapped up in the word that we call incarnation. And no, I'm not referring to the song Nacho Libre saying in the movie Nacho Libre, Encarnacion. If you have not watched that, Candace and I pulled it up, and Candace and I listened to it last night. It is such a hilarious song. It is a masterpiece of songwriting. I'm not referring to that song. I'm referring to a major theme in Christian theology, and it's called incarnation. And incarnation is foundational. This isn't an option. This is so foundational to understanding the person and the nature of Christ. Incarnation comes from a Latin word which means in the flesh. It refers to the eternal Son of God taking on human nature through the virgin birth, becoming the man Jesus of Nazareth. In John chapter 1, verse 14, it's on the screen. It says, the Word became flesh, and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, the one who came from the Father, full of grace and full of truth. The idea that incarnation is embodying is that Jesus didn't just remain as divine, he actually took on human flesh. This is complicated. This is beautiful. This is intriguing. It's fascinating because once you begin to understand the fullness of what that is, it changes your entire perspective on everything in existence. And today, my goal is to help unpack that. The early church wrestled with this deeply because there are different trains of thought. If we are to embody incarnation, then we would become like God. We would become a God. And some of you are familiar, different branches and different faiths, they believe you actually become a God. So understanding how complex this theological thing to try to articulate it is very difficult. So in 451 AD, a council got together of early church leaders, and they came up with this statement, which still is used by a lot of Christian, a core tenet of the faith when it comes to Christianity. I'm going to read it to you. Jesus is one person with two natures, fully divine and fully human, without confusion, change, division, or separation. So what I want to do is I want to walk you through, let's make sure, I want to walk you through this idea of Jesus in the flesh. What does it actually introduce that might be new, or for some of you, a refresher? Jesus in the flesh, go ahead and put the next slide up. Jesus in the flesh challenges dualistic thinking. Remember, that is a separation between spirit and matter, which also the separation of secular, I'm merging words now, sacred and secular. When Jesus in the flesh, it challenges that framework. So the first one it does, God doesn't avoid matter, he enters it. Dualism says spirit is pure and matter is corrupt. Jesus in the flesh said Jesus was born human. This affirmed that matter is not beneath God, it's where God chooses to meet us. The second thing it does is that God is not distant, he is present. In dualistic thinking, the divine is up there and out there. But in the incarnation, God is with us, is where we get his name, Emmanuel. Walking, touching, eating, weeping, and working. The body is not a problem, it's a temple. Jesus affirmed the dignity of the body by taking on one himself. The incarnation reclaimed the body as a sacred place, not a barrier to God, but a vessel for his presence. I want to camp on this just for a moment, because I'm fully aware that many of us have been told our bodies are evil, our bodies are, it's the worst vessel to be in, just hang in there until the end and we'll get out of it. What Jesus does by becoming in the flesh of a human, he rewires it and he said it's not a problem, it's actually a temple. It's a place he wants to reside. He's not residing to just duct tape this body together until some end time happens. He actually redeems it and restores it. So our view of our own bodies needs to be moved out of its negative and needs to be moved into the area of God actually makes it a temple. He redeems it. He chose to put one on himself and he chose to redeem it, not just for that one body, but for all of humanity, backwards and forwards. Next one, the earth is not a stage for escape. It's a place for redemption. Dualism says our goal is to leave earth and get to heaven. The incarnation says heaven comes to earth. God moves towards creation, not away from it. Everyday life is now sacred. Dualism separates it. Incarnation says, no, everyday life is now sacred. If God became human, then nothing human is irrelevant. All your meals, all your conversation, all your work, all your hobbies, all your play, all your Bible reading, all your spending time with your family and friends, spending time with strangers, all of that becomes sacred. I'm going to keep going. You guys with me? The incarnation is not only a theological mystery, it actually gives the evidence and it's the essence of why you have to have a manifesto or a framework of engaging with culture. Because you can't embrace incarnation and think we separate from humanity and culture in this world. You have to recognize Jesus actually demonstrates being in the flesh and being in the world. Not of it, but in it. So when we talk about engaging with culture and cities and neighborhoods and world systems and et cetera, the essence of the incarnation gives the reason and the evidence of why you need some framework of engaging with culture to understand why. What's the point of this? God does not flee matter, time, culture, or chaos. He enters it, he joins it, and he redeems it from within. It would be an entirely different framework if Jesus never became human. If Jesus only stayed as divine God and never entered in the flesh, we would not be having this conversation. But everything changes when he enters humanity, became humanity, embodies it, and he redeems it all in one fell swoop. As we get into this, I thought it would also be helpful, because some of you, I know, like, okay, spirit, matter, okay, I get that, I understand how we need to integrate, sacred, secular, all this sacred, but I thought it would be helpful to go, how does this play out in our everyday life? To give you some examples, some areas. Remember, this talk is not for your neighbor. This is not for your spouse, your friend, or your kids. This is for you. So I want to go through a few slides here that help to show you how this dualistic thinking, how it could play out in your life. So let's go to the next slide. First one I want to talk about is soul-focused salvation. The emphasis is on saving the soul from hell rather than the holistic renewal of the person or the world that they live in. This world is not our home theology. Heavy emphasis on heaven as the final destination, often sidelining care for the earth, for justice, or cultural engagement. Prophetic words, angelic encounters, miracles may be seen as more meaningful than faithfulness in ordinary work or family life. That one always gets the response. Next slide. Spiritual experiences are elevated above ordinary life. If you don't integrate spirit and matter into the same and have an all is sacred framework, then you will always elevate spiritual experiences above living ordinary life. The supernatural is often used or emphasized in contrast to the, quote, natural, as if one is more real or more spiritual than the other. Are you guys with me still? I know I'm getting your wheels turning. That is my goal today, to get you to think. The dualistic thinking, it creates a disdain for tradition or structure. It's an overemphasis on spontaneous spirit-led moments can sometimes devalue embodied practices, such as sacraments or liturgy or spiritual disciplines. Gifting is more important than formation. Spiritual gifts are prioritized over long-term character development, vocation, or creation stewardship. Dualistic thinking will tell you spiritual gift is the priority. Integrative thinking says it's all important. Next slide. We got slides coming out of I got slides coming out of my ears and back pockets. Heaven-focused eschatology, which sees the world as declining and destined for destruction. Bodily suspicion. Though the Spirit-filled believer, there can be lingering discomfort with the physicality, the body, the emotion, the sexuality, and earthly pleasure. There's a lot in that one that we don't have time to get into today. And then holiness teaching. While they're all well-meaning, these often rely on withdrawal from the world, so clothing code, media ban, boycotts. You get the idea. It reinforces a clean versus unclean dichotomy. I do want to say something on this. The priests in the Old Testament were instructed to not touch anything clean, anything sick, or anything dirty, or anything that hadn't gone through a process of being clean. Jesus comes into the New Testament as the new priest, which is the new prototype. He touched culture, he touched sickness, he touched disease, he engaged with humanity in its most broken places and redeems it. So Jesus actually embodies a prototype of what it means to not be dualistic, to put it all together, and all is sacred. Next slide. It's a strong focus on the rapture. It encourages escape over engagement. This kind of thinking is often subtle, but it shows up in how we talk about full-time ministry versus, quote, regular jobs, or how we reduce salvation to getting souls to heaven. I think one of the predicaments that the church must address and remedy is this dynamic right here. So many people are longing for something, not recognizing what they're actually doing is considered sacred to him. So I want to bring this question back up to you that I asked at the beginning of the talk. We know that Jesus died for humanity, but did he die for all of creation? As we look at these familiar, long-held beliefs and assumptions, it can be really daunting to move away from them. However, once you embrace Jesus in the flesh, it opens up an entirely new realm of possibilities about the future. One of the profound implications of the Incarnation is that Jesus came not only to redeem individual human souls, but to restore all of creation. This is the central thread of biblical theology, though it's not often underemphasized in traditions that are shaped by dualism or escapist theologies. Let's go to the next slide. We got a few more here. You guys still with me? Okay. I want to talk now about how incarnation in the flesh point to the redemption of all creation. I don't want to just say it. I want to go through a little bit of how and why when you embrace in the flesh and you move away from dualism, you move away from sacred secular, and you actually embrace incarnation, how it actually points to it's all creation, not just the human soul. Point one is this. The Word became flesh. We already read the passage earlier. God didn't just appear to be human. He took on a real, physical, biological, embodied flesh, and that matters. Jesus' humanity means that material creation is not disposable, but it's redeemable. Number two, in Colossians 1:15-20, there is a sentence in there that says this: through him to reconcile all things, whether things on earth or things in heaven. Yeah. Paul presents Jesus as the cosmic Christ, the one through whom all things were made and through whom all things will be reconciled. The same idea is found in Romans 8. If you're unfamiliar with Romans 8, it's one of the beefiest theological chapters you can find in Paul's letters, Romans 8. He says this: the creation itself will be set free from its bondage and decay. In fact, it also said creation groans for the sons of men, sons of God, to actually come into its being, because creation is groaning to be set free, to be healed, to be restored. Paul makes it clear that all of creation groans for redemption, not just human coals. I don't know what human coals are, but I meant to say human souls. The incarnation, and because of the resurrection, is the first fruits of that renewal. I want to pause right here. The word that Paul uses when we become a new creation, he uses it in two different expressions. One, he uses about the human soul. You become your soul, you as a human become a new creation. But in the other passages in Colossians and Romans, he's making the same words. He's using at all of creation, not just the human soul. So understand, he's actually embodying the idea of all of creation being redeemed, restored, and made new, or remodeled is another way to look at it. Point 4, resurrection as first fruit. Jesus' resurrection wasn't an escape from the material world. It was a bodily resurrection. It was the prototype for the new creation. So what God did in Jesus' body, he will do for the entire cosmos. Point 5. We'll get into the end. You're doing great. The incarnation and the new creation. Revelation ends not with us going up to heaven. I'm going to say that again. In the book of Revelation, the book in the Bible that is often read and interpreted, that the end game is we go to heaven. In Revelation, it's actually the opposite. A new Jerusalem comes to earth. I know some of you, I'm shaking some of your core foundation, and I understand that. God dwelling with us on a renewed earth. The incarnation is the down payment for that future. I'm going to summarize this into 4 or 5 different phrases. This will be helpful. The incarnation dignifies creation. In the flesh dignifies creation. If you don't run with that idea, then you're missing out, I believe personally, what Jesus was actually trying to do. He wasn't just like, okay, what's the option? I guess I'll just feel a human and do 33 years of being one and crying like one, laughing like one, hurting like one, eating like one, sweating like one, working like one, and just kind of get this thing done with and get, no. All of that was to dignify what he said in Genesis chapter 1. All of creation was good. The second thing, the cross reconciles creation. It's the death and the resurrection of Jesus reconciles creation. The resurrection renews creation. And the ascension, which is when Jesus ascends back to the Father, the ascension and the return guarantee, when Jesus said, I'm coming back, the return guarantee is the fullness of that renewal. There's a slide that I want to show you, if you can go to the last slide. The belief that the Spirit is good and matter is bad essentially divorced what God had designed to dwell together. The belief that the Spirit is good and matter is bad essentially divorced what God had designed to dwell together. So I'm proposing to you today, the cross is not just for human souls. The cross and the resurrection was for everything that was broken by sin. We have to ask them deeper questions. Why is there an escapist theology? Why is there a dualistic thinking? Why is this 20 years old, 20 centuries, 10 centuries, 5 centuries old? Why are some of these ideas? Remember, theology is your conclusion of how you understand, interpret, and you create a theology out of it. This is why, for those of you that love to dive into theology, this is why it's really important to go back to the early church fathers as early as possible and understand their frameworks. Because as civilization progressed, it began to morph and different philosophies crept in and morphed and changed it. But what I want you to understand is that all of us, to some degree, that have followed, we have a theology. And the challenge with theology is you're trying to reconcile something you may not understand. You also are trying to reconcile your own human experience of living in this world. So when you look at escapist theologies in particular, One of the primary reasons I believe escapist theologies are created and embraced because for some of those individuals, core individuals, John Calvin, Martin Luther, Confronting, Augustine, and the list continued, they're trying to reconcile the horribleness of the world that they lived in. There's so much pain. There's so much suffering. There's so much despair. There's so much sickness. We think we deal with a lot of sickness. There were centuries where plagues would wipe out 30 to 70% of the population. So try to reconcile, where's God in all this? So as the human is longing for understanding, we're meaning-making machines. Oftentimes we short-circuit the big picture and take a chunk off and say, well, this explains it. And we create escapist theologies, which means this. Well, don't worry, everybody. All is hell right now, but don't worry. We're getting out of here. And it helps the human soul to go, well, at least I'm getting out of here. This is important. I want to bring this to your attention because sometimes our theologies are just trying to explain the human experience. The challenge is God doesn't create theology. He introduces truth. And our goal as humans is to move closer and closer to the truth that He is conveying. And that requires people that deeply care about it and begin to teach and frame it. It does require humility on everybody's part to be willing to move closer instead of holding on to assumptions and beliefs that we've held on to for decades and decades and decades. So I just want to encourage you. I understand the dynamics of it's why escapist theology is exciting to so many people. Because they look around the world today and they realize, well, there's no hope left. At least I'm good. And I understand that. I just want to make a statement today that I want to invite each of you. This talk is not a line in the sand where I am and where you are. No, this talk is to invite you. And I think the church at large has short-circuited what it means to follow Jesus in this area. We have reduced salvation down to following Jesus. We forgot the other part. He's also inviting us to participate in the renewal of all things. So I want to propose that when we talk about salvation, we expand it outside of just our souls being saved and the Spirit coming in, which is so essential and important. Because how many know we need redemption? We need healing. We need restoration ourselves. But let's not forget that it wasn't just meant to be God and humans. It was meant to be the three-body problem, which is God, humans, and this world. So I want to propose to you to take some deep thinking, to approach this with some deep thoughts and some deep thinking. Can we do that? How many will do that with me? Amazing. Why don't you stand?